Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Legacy Leaders. Scott McMeans is now joined with Andrew Reinhart, who is the owner of Becoming Gift. Really interesting backstory, a lot of moving parts in what he's done in his career. So I am excited to have Andrew on the program simply because his story is worth telling and his opportunity to be on the show is intriguing enough to tell you something that you probably haven't heard before. So, with that being said, Andrew, the microphone and camera are yours. Introduce yourself. Tell us your story. What do you do? How well you do it, and why people like working with you. Please introduce yourself.
Well, thanks for having me on, Scott. My name's Andrew Reinhart, and so what I do, it's a great story. So I started out in my career in computer engineering of all things, which was a wonderful education, and certainly it helps to know technology, but my job in many ways couldn't be further from engineering. Um, I felt a calling and spent 4 years in the seminary studying potentially to go into ministry. And it became clear as I was in my graduate studies that that wasn't what I was meant to do. So I left and then pursued a career of what we call lay ministry in the church, which simply means working for churches in ministry roles, but not as an ordained pastor. And so my first role out of university was in campus ministry. So a couple years of campus ministry. And after doing that, after my second alternative spring break trip, I realized there's no way I could possibly do this job, put enough food on the table for a family, and be home enough for a wife and
Mhm.
kids. So I made a jump from there, and I helped manage a church for about 10 years. So the cathedral here in Toledo, Rosary Cathedral, and so there I was. It was kind of a multi-purpose role. You can think of a church as like any other business. You know, you have
Mhm.
uh, bookkeeping, you have facilities, you have staff, you have a mission, you have a vision, you have sort of customers in the people who attend. So many of the principles and concepts that work well in other environments work well in churches too. And in fact, the best churches apply the best knowledge and insights from the business world. So in that role, I was basically the day-to-day manager of the site. The pastor had a second role in our diocese structure as one of our bishop's kind of main lieutenants. So I was there to manage the day-to-day operation, everything from the finance and facilities to managing the whole staff to overseeing all of the ministries going on in the church. So it was really a great education in business because I remember going to a conference a couple years in with Pat Lancioni, who's a famous business consultant, and learning his
Mhm.
principles around teamwork and vision and strategy, and then we brought that back and sitting down with the church council and with the staff, and going through a strategic planning process, much like any business might do. Looking at
Mhm.
core values and mission and vision and laying out a strategic action plan. And by doing that, in my time there, we were able to, in a period of time when actually our average church in our area was shrinking 2 or 3% a year, we were able to go from about 600 families to 700 families in the church while I was there. Um, so it was like I said, a great education and blessing. But after 10 years of kind of what I would say being on the front lines, it's a lot of evenings and
Mhm.
weekends. You have to be there when people are available, meaning when
Mhm.
people are working, they're not going to be at their church. So my
Right.
wife and I were praying about having and starting our family, and I realized that one, I probably could make a little more money, and two, I needed to be home on the evenings and weekends. So then I got into a role with our diocese in a department called it's our Department of Discipleship and Family Life, and with that, I'm the lead of a team we call the Ministry for Healthy Parishes. So you can think of this role that I do for the diocese as like an in-house business consultant for
Mhm.
churches to run better. So I take and analyze all the data the diocese has and apply it to our decision-making processes, from everything from how the churches are organized to how the ministers are assigned to um, our own strategic planning process as an organization. And I also do coaching with pastors to help them run their churches better. But when I took this move, there was something in my heart that knew I would miss different elements of what I was doing working directly for the church. Specific things were working one on one with people, just in the day to day life stuff.
Hmm.
those relationships with people, and then also in being able to do all the teaching I was doing and all the public speaking that I was doing. So I had a couple opportunities when all this is happening. I also had a kind of a personal internal transformation that launched my passion project, which is the company I own, Becoming Gift. So when I started after grad school, let's say I wasn't very healthy. I got to about 400 pounds. I was smoking. I wasn't sleeping well. I was riddled with stress. I mean, sometimes I'm still a little riddled with stress, but um, you know, and I was at the time, you could say my brand was growing, so to speak, although I
Yeah.
wouldn't use that language in the church space. But I was getting invitations to go around and do public speaking, and getting invited on different boards of directors and different influential positions in the organization. And and I was going around teaching. I realized that what's the message that my life is giving? It's one thing to get up and say good things, but it's another thing to actually live a life that's worth imitating. And I realized, like, at the core, I wasn't living what I was professing. The mission that I was on, I wasn't applying it in my personal life as thoroughly as I really needed to. So I took some steps back. I stopped accepting the invitations to go speak. I stepped down off of a lot of positions I was in and just took some time to get right. And, it was a long process, about 5 years, and a mixture of good doctors and counselors and therapists and everything else. And in that process, I lost about 200 pounds.
Wow.
I was able to correct my sleep. I was able to change my relationship with stress. Um, and this really kind of ignited a passion in me because of how one, it transformed my prayer and my spirituality to get physically more healthy, but
Hmm.
then also my ability to work and to engage and the passion that I had for what I was doing. So I became super passionate about the relationship between fitness and spirituality, between health and having that kind of deep, meaningful relationship with God and yourself. So I spent about 3 years just digging into research on biology and psychology and neurology and all these
Hmm.
wonderful fields. I already kind of had the theology and philosophy background, and I was writing a book, putting these topics together. And as people saw this transformation in me, new doors started to open up. I was invited to go on some different podcasts and radio shows and share my story. And then as I was doing that, people were hearing me and then inviting me to do more things. And before I knew it, I had a regular weekly segment on our really regional radio station. And then I ended up being invited to start a podcast, which I'm still doing, called Physically Spiritual, which is an exploration of this relationship between health and spirituality.
Okay.
Um, so with that, I opened my business, Becoming Gift LLC, kind of as a response to the doors that were being opened to me and the opportunities that were being opened to me. Because then, along with that, of course, the kind of things I was invited to do as far as public speaking and consulting with people were also expanding. And then at the same time, I felt called to continue that one-on-one work with people. So at first, I did a life coaching certification and started working with people specifically, in that area that I was so passionate about, in that nexus between health and spirituality. Because oftentimes, people might go to their pastor or their minister and get a certain set of advice about, how to approach a situation, and they go to their doctor or their counselor or someone and get a different set of ideas. But
Hmm.
oftentimes they're kind of disjointed. Sometimes the advice that people get from a counselor or a medical professional conflict with the values they have in their faith. Or sometimes, people of faith can over spiritualize their problems. Think, I'm just going to pray this away and it'll disappear.
Yeah.
And other times, people just have a hard time sort of feeling like one whole person that's integrated, and that what they do at church on Sunday is connected to what they do when they're, at the
Hmm.
gym on Monday. Um, so I work with people one on one in coaching and spiritual direction to help them navigate typically complex situations where they're kind of navigating an illness or some kind of spiritual difficulty.
Hmm. What
So
I
that's the nutshell.
I appreciate you going down that path and explaining to people how your personal journey has kind of tied itself to the creation of becoming gift and the opportunity to take your personal journey and share it with others that a pathway of physical fitness, spirituality, mindset is all connected to the opportunity for success. It doesn't guarantee it, but it gives you the opportunity for success. And I like the idea of just the way, Andrew, you explained the work you were doing at a church. And people probably don't make this connection until you explain it the way you do. And that is, there is a vision, a mission, and there are values. There's a culture within a church. And what do we stand for? What are we trying to do? And strategically, how are we going to get more people into our flock? How are we
Mm.
going to do this so the church as a business can serve more and multiple people? And it's no different than running your own business, right? You have to have a vision, a mission, and establish a culture based on values. And from there, the mindset of everybody that's involved is all working towards a common goal. And they're all understanding what we're trying to do. And it's no different from your business, whether you're a landscaper or a lawyer or a physician or an HVAC guy. It's no different. You have to have an established vision. You have to understand the mission you're on and the values that create the culture that you're going to attract the right people, whether they're the people that are going to buy from you or the people that want to work with you. You have to have that entity that's created in your own image. And when you have, and again, some of the teachings about how do you take your physicality, your spirituality, and your mentality and put it in good use. And it's hard to be disciplined in all three of those areas, but they balance each other in such a way that if you're physically fit, you feel better. You're not as depressed or you're more energized. If you have spirituality connected to a vision, a mission, and values that are beyond the company, but have something you can hold on to. And then you think about, all right, what's my mentality? What's my thought process on how I'm going to take ownership, be accountable, and responsible for things I see and do? That is by far the trinity of how you be successful in business, right? And you're just talking about the success you've had within the church, but now you're looking at it. Now I'm running my own business, and those things all ring true. It's exactly how you run a business is you have those things established. I appreciate you telling us that story. I am curious to learn, Andrew, as you've gone through this journey, what's a challenge that you think, being somebody that's been there and done that, that you'd share with the audience so they don't have to follow that particular set of footsteps and they can kind of come around those footsteps and get beyond it without having to deal with that challenge? What's a big challenge that you face that you'd like to talk to people about?
Yeah, I would say three. If I could share quickly three challenges. The first would be um, one that I hope other people don't have to face, and that's I launched my business a couple months before the pandemic started. Um, so one wing of it was the podcast, another wing of it was the kind of coaching and working with folks one-on-one. So what happened then in the spring when the lockdowns happened was this space of kind of being online, being on YouTube, putting out a podcast got really busy really fast.
Hmm.
And we went from having kind of blue water to having red water, to
Yeah.
borrow some terms where, a lot of these kind of heavy hitters in the information space and in the currency of ideas lost their platform to travel around and give talks and presentations and do conferences. So a lot of them turned to podcasting, to online platforms to continue
Yeah.
their businesses. So we right away had a huge challenge, of trying to grow this business in the midst of the pandemic. The second challenge was really, I think when people start a content creation business or any business, I think the temptation is to try to get it as big as you can, as fast as you can. Um, and the one thing that I realized was I didn't need to have 1 million followers to be successful. So when I started and realized, oh, the video only got 500 views or 1,000 views or maybe up to 5,000 views or whatever. At first I was disappointed and wondered why isn't the channel meeting my expectations for growth?
Hmm.
Um, but then over time, it became clear to me that really it was more about getting the information in front of the right people than it was about getting the information in front of everyone. Because I mean, the topic that I'm talking on is kind of for a niche audience. If people that are both interested in spirituality and
Hmm.
physical health, um, and then I'm coming at it from my own kind of religious denominational background too. So people of a different denomination might not find it as appealing. But then two, by getting specific on what my audience was, it turned the water blue again.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that was, well, while there was, 10,000 different people, getting online and starting podcasts and YouTube shows and everything else, I was the only one who was specifically connecting health and spirituality, right?
Okay.
So by kind of uh, almost like a hedgehog kind of strategy, but kind of burying myself into that specific niche and defining success by getting to those people who have that interest, because there is a burgeoning interest in our society about health and wellness.
Yeah.
Think of just RFK Jr. becoming the head of the HHS. I think is a great kind of symbol of that in our society. But how many self-help books are there now, or fitness or nutrition ideas, or some of the biggest podcasts in the world are talking either all the time about health and wellness or a good amount of the time about health and wellness.
And what they
Um,
do, real quick, Andrew, they talk about health and wellness in the fact that they're so connected that you have to have a good balance between your mental health, your physical health, and your spirituality. And I'm not trying to say everybody needs to be a Bible thumping individual. What they need to have is a connection to something bigger than themselves. And to contribute to that, it comes back to you tenfold. Same thing I would say about the mentality and the physicality. If you're physically fit and you have a right mentality, it's tenfold response to how the world reacts to you. And it's not because you're such a positive person that everything around you is great. It's that your mindset does not allow the negativity to weigh you down because I'm physically fit. I feel good about myself. And now I feel good about the world around me because now I get a chance to influence those that are listening to me. And I like the story you're telling because it's almost as if not that you need to wait, but you need to put your message out there so your voice finds the right ear that's willing to listen to it. And once that happens, then your following grows because you found that group of people that align with you. And before you know it, your following grows because more and more people actually pay attention to what you're saying, not because somebody else did, it's because they finally got their ear to hear your voice. And I think that's one of the most powerful things we all can talk about marketing and outreach, but that's exactly what everybody's trying to do when they market their business is I need to get my message to the right ear. It may not be 100 people in a room all need and want to talk to me. It's who is in that room willing to talk to me because they need something. I'm going to go talk to that person, right? It's more of a
that's right.
targeted approach.
Yeah, and then the third challenge I had was um, providing the people that were encountering me online a clear direction,
Mm,
meaning I had to get clear. Some people use the term a funnel, right? So you're going to have some kind of wider aperture in your business, whether it be maybe you're doing billboards, maybe you're doing radio spots, maybe you have your own YouTube channel or something like that. Um, but the idea is that from that, the idea is where do you want that person that finds you online to go next?
hmm
Right. So what I had to do is get really clear about I was really trying to work deeply with less people than try to have a more surface level impact on a ton of people. Now, anyone, of course, can find the content I've produced and apply it in their own life. But really, where I was trying to drive people to was into that coaching practice, into that one-on-one practice with me,
hmm
meeting with me. Um, and so I remember, at first, the first person that asked me to coach them and work with them, it was through a mutual friend. It wasn't even somebody that found me through a podcast. It's someone that recommended me through personal relationships. But then what happened is over time, about half the people at a certain point who contacted me were people who encountered me online, encountered me through the podcast. And then, by the time my client list was full and I was creating a wait list and turning clients away or referring them to other people, over probably three-quarters of the people that were finding me were coming from the podcast or from the radio spot that I have. So it's being really clear about and at this point, I actually don't even mention the coaching practice on the podcast anymore
Hmm.
because I can't take more clients. I have more people than I can work with in a
That's a
wait
good
list that I
problem to
can't
have,
get
right?
through. So people still find it because it's on my website and it's mentioned on the previous episodes. Um, but having that clarity about what's the direction or what's the clear kind of call to action you want your customer to have that finds you. It's one thing to do sort of like brand awareness.
Hmm.
Um, but if you really look at good advertisers, they're asking you to do something specific,
hmm
right? Buy their product, come to their store, become their client, etc.
That's an interesting perspective. It's almost you're prescribing what's next. And it's not that you're telling people what to do. You're telling people, again, I'm gonna go back to you're telling people the options that are available. And this is the best one according to my vision, my mission, and the values and the culture I have within my organization that's drawing people into you. And then they make the decision to participate. That's a powerful message because you're not screaming from the mountaintop, this is what you have to do. It's this is what works for certain people. If you want to come on board, let's talk and let's bring you into the fold so you can learn the different things from mentality, spirituality, physical fitness. Like how do you transform yourself? And that's a word you've made comment to a number of times is transformation. How do you get people to transform themselves from who they were to who they want to be, right? It's not an easy path for certain people. But it's a path worth taking because if you want to be something different than you are right now, you have to be willing to be a different type of person and do different things that you weren't doing before in order to have those things in your life that are in fact different. And I think that's a powerful message for anybody.
Yeah, the power of change. You know, we don't, I think, spend enough time pondering how did I end up here and how do I get where I want to be?
Yeah,
You know, we often, the rise and grind mentality, I think, is sometimes even too strong in our society that I'm just going to get up and try harder today,
yeah.
right? But if you're not trying harder at the right stuff, you're not going
Right.
to actually
Or,
get toward that vision or that goal.
yeah. Or you have the wrong data or you're following data that's inaccurate. Because one of the things I thought was really interesting you said earlier on is your work with certain churches when you were with the diocese was I'm going to drill down into the data and do some analytics so we can do data-driven decision making. That is so businesslike, Andrew. But again, people are not willing to take that information at face value because the narrative or the thought process they have, which you just said, is I just need to work harder. How about we stop working so hard and let's figure out how to work smart? And the data says stop doing what you're doing because you're wasting money. Let's take that money or that effort and put it over here. And maybe you can spend less money and less effort, less energy. You can actually get a bigger result because now we're doing better decision making because of data and education. And those are the things as coaches, right? We're really explaining to people, I'm not the one that's going to tell you what to do. I'm the one that's going to teach you how to be a better decision maker because we're either going to use data or we're going to follow our vision and mission. We're going to install a culture so you have something you can always be grounded to. I'm working with somebody right now that is changing their vision or their mission, or they're changing it in such a way that they're going to install different sets of values because over time the business has morphed and now he wants to change the way the values are incorporated. And it's interesting to go through this exercise with this client because I'm remembering some of the work that I've done in the past and now I'm helping him do this. And one of the things is these are the undeniable truths that you hold your business to, even if they could be perceived as a competitive disadvantage. But you believe them so heartily that you're going to do it. And I hate to bring up Chick-fil-A, but it's the one organization that I find amazing because their mission is not to get you to buy chicken sandwiches. Their mission is for you to have an amazing experience so you come back. Their biggest mission statement comment is retention. They want people to keep coming back. And they do that by giving you this unbelievable product and this experience when you come there that you are thankful that you went through the experience of being at a Chick-fil-A. That's just my opinion of how Chick-fil-A does things, right? And if more
Mhm.
businesses adopted the mentality of we're going to have this amazing vision, mission, and culture, and we're going to build our business around it, I think you'd have a lot more success with that than you do chasing the next greatest thing or the next fad because somebody else did it and they were successful. I think we need to be a little bit more pragmatic when we look at our business in that what's the data telling us and what's our heart telling us we should be doing? If you combine those two, I don't think you can lose. What do you think?
Yeah, a lot of what I do, and I think of it as almost like playing Moneyball with the church. It's that idea of applying data into a constrained resource environment, which is really what we have. So, you know, if a young man wants to become a priest, it takes them 7 to 9 years, right? So if you just want to get more clergy, right? You can't just make them appear.
Yeah.
You have to invest in a long-term process to recruit and train those people and then retain them, of course. A church can't raise capital the same way a for-profit business does that's going to have margins and the potential kind
Mm.
of growth or upside on the other side of that investment. So in many ways, the church has certain resource constraints that are similar to, being in a salary cap sport. Um, and the reality is, 100 years ago, the smartest person in any given little town or village, the smartest person they ever heard was probably their pastor. Because the average pastor has a graduate degree, and other than the doctors and lawyers in town, they were probably the smartest, best rhetorician they ever heard. And now churches exist in this space where every single one of their parishioners has access to
Mm.
podcasts and YouTube shows and all kinds of content where they have the world leading experts in any given topic whom are
Yeah.
vastly more educated and probably better public speakers than their pastors are. Right. So churches are competing in this hyper competitive idea economy that we currently have in our society. And so a lot of churches are struggling to meet those demands. So in a lot of ways, what I think the way I conceptualize it is we need to start playing Moneyball, meaning we
Hmm.
need to accept our resource constraints for what they are and make smarter decisions with what we have. And I love what you keep coming back to is the idea of mission, because that's
Hmm.
baked into the bread of being a nonprofit organization.
Yeah.
The only difference between a nonprofit and a for-profit is the nonprofit's supposed to make money, but the money is directed into the mission. Where
Yeah.
the for-profit, the money goes to the owner, the stakeholder, the shareholder, etc. So in the nonprofit environment, which is where churches operate, all of the money that's coming in is directed into that mission, into that defined purpose that you've given to the organization. So even more so than a for-profit business, the nonprofit or the church needs to have that clear vision, because they need to know where they're investing, that the money that comes in, the profits that come in.
Hmm. Well, I think the one word that has such a unique meaning in that conversation is investment. Where are you investing? Okay, financially, we have an understanding of where the investment's going because it's going to fulfill the mission and bring money or funds back to helping that mission. But what else are you investing in? Is it training? Is it leadership? Is it reiteration of the values and the purpose statement so people get an understanding of why we're here? That investment is just as important as where the money goes. Because if you continue to invest in your people and you find a way to lead them in a direction that they never thought was possible, but they're motivated to do it, that is a huge investment. So there's a lot of give and take on the word investment. And again, not to bring up Chick-fil-A again, but their training program and how much they invest in their people is significantly different than every other fast food restaurant. And it obviously produces results. Ironically, they're not open on Sundays. Church's biggest day is Sunday. But you look at a Chick-fil-A and they're outperforming almost 4-1 any other fast food restaurant. And it's because of their productivity is one thing, but the way they fulfill that mission, and that is how do we get people to come back and experience this again? Retention is their number one mission. And all that comes down to everything they do cascades from that. In that, when you are greeted, they're very nice, and when they're done, my pleasure, right? It's a theme, right? So if you think about that in any business, why are we not doing what Chick-fil-A does? You could be an unbelievably successful business, or your church could be that much more productivity or have that much more productivity because you're following a certain line of thought and bringing it into practice. So I love the idea of taking all this stuff and wrapping up into a business because it doesn't matter whether, again, you're a landscaper or an architect. What matters is how you serve people. And what's more important is how you serve. It's not necessarily what you serve. Granted, you have to have a good product, right, in order for people to come on board with you. But it's how you serve that allows people to stay with you because they feel like they're part of something, right?
Mm,
And again, that goes
right.
very strong in the church mentality, which I'm part of something bigger than me. So how do I
Mm,
serve in that in such a way that I know I'm getting it back? And everything you're talking about is, it's very uniquely positioned for helping the church through your business. And I 100% agree with you're doing. And it's ironic that all this stuff, Andrew, that is so focused on the church side of it, just turn over instead of saying it's whatever diocese you're associated with and say, what business would not be profitable if they followed this mentality, right? Data driven decisions, have a mindset and a passion to follow things, transform yourself from who you are to who you want to be. There's so much about the mirroring of what you're doing in the church side, which absolutely will work on the business side. So this has been a great conversation. I appreciate you being a part of it. We talked a lot about a number of different things, the challenges and whatnot. Is there was one business lesson that you think somebody should learn, what would that lesson be?
Hmm. Can I give you two?
Absolutely.
Two. One, I think the core of any business is encounter and presence. So encountering people and being fully present to them. So much of what I think you keep mentioning Chick-fil-A,
Hmm.
so much of what I think the experience is you realize you're the priority. They're there to serve you.
Hmm.
Where in many other fast food chains, you almost seem like you're an inconvenience. Like the people wish you
Right.
weren't ordering the food because they have to get up off their phone or whatever they were doing when there weren't any customers at the door. But that presence, that being fully, truly with somebody, listening to them, not being on your phone. I think across the board, there's a poverty of presence in our society.
Hmm.
The old stereotype is the family sitting at a restaurant, and everyone's looking at their phones or tablets.
Yep.
Um, but if you can sit down across somebody at a table or on a Zoom call and be fully present, where you're eye to eye,
Yeah.
listening, you're not distracted by the screens, you're not looking around at the other people. But regardless of what you're doing, if you can be really present with the people you're with, I think you're going to be successful. And the second thing I would say is learn to ask good questions. Learn to ask good questions. Um, if you're seeking the truth, which is what a question does. A question demands an answer. It's almost like a neurological imperative that when you ask somebody a question, whether or not they say anything, their brain tries to answer it. So questions are very powerful for the human mind. Go back to somebody like Plato. That's how philosophy started in Greece was he would walk around and ask people hard questions and it got him killed, right?
Hmm.
He was the or Socrates, but then Plato ended up in exile. He was the one person that didn't vote to go to war with Sparta in the Athenian city-state, and it's because he was asking the right questions. Um,
Hmm.
so questions demand answers. So we have to make sure we're asking good questions and the right questions.
I like that. There's a power in questioning, whether it's to figure out for your own understanding or to open the eyes of somebody else that doesn't see what you're seeing. Not that you're always right, but the opportunity to address a situation from two different sides. The best way to open those doors is to ask the question. And I think that's what's lost. And one of the things you made comment to that kind of mirror the poverty of presence that we have right now kind of yields to the idea that people aren't asking enough questions. It's almost as if it's a challenge to sit across the table from somebody that you may have a disagreement with. Instead of arguing, ask questions to understand each other's perspective. And you know what? You may or may not convince me to change my mind, but at least the opportunity exists to have that happen. It's when we stop talking is when arguments and violence happen, is when we stop talking to each other and learning from each other. That's when bad stuff comes about. So with my mindset towards this as being a coach, you would agree, I hope, we don't position ourselves as the authority in anything, but we are
Hmm.
the authority to ask the right question, to get you thinking differently than what you may have thought 10 minutes ago. Just because I asked you a question, I'm getting you to think differently. And that's all about mindset, which goes back to the trinity of mindset, physical fitness, and spirituality. Where are you in mind, body, and soul? And that's something that I firmly believe in because they do tie to each other. This has been, Andrew, an enlightful conversation. I want to thank you for being a part of it and sharing your story and what you do. All the information to get in touch with Andrew will be in the description down below. If you're interested in figuring out more about what Becoming Gift can do, I encourage you to reach out and learn as much as you can. Andrew, any final words?
Yeah, no, yeah, like you said, Becoming Gift is my website, becominggift.com. It'll take you to my Substack where I post everything. So you can find the podcast there, the radio spot, my coaching practice, how to get a hold of me if you want me to come speak, or also I write blog articles and things on there too.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being a part of the program. We will see everybody on the next episode of Legacy Leaders. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.